Alright, so we've thrown the three components of the teapot. Now we need to assemble the teapot. So I still have the spout left on the bat, and I'll show you why in just a moment. Once we get to that spot, the teapot, I've left the lid seat completely alone. Haven't done anything to that, but I have trimmed the bottom, as with anything. Trimmed a foot on it, both inside and outside line. I like to trim that little crease so that I can get a little bit of runoff of glaze, and it'll catch it, hopefully. Never perfect or never 100%. Then this was thrown, again, upside down, like this. And what I mean by upside down is I flipped it over after cutting it off the bat, and I trim it round. I don't trim a foot or anything like that. I could do little terraces or tiers, but this will be my lid that will fit into that lid seat. So I'll do that a little bit later, but I am going to do the spout first. So the spout, I don't want this entire thing on my teapot. One, it's too big, and two, I threw it a particular way to where I want to cut at a slant, because I don't want this jutting out sideways from my teapot. Okay? It doesn't make a lot of sense. It's not very aesthetically pleasing. It's going to spill liquid out earlier than it should before I've started a genuine pour. So what I'm going to do with this is get my teapot out of the way. But I'm going to cut at a slant. So I'm going to start high and end low. I can even do this sideways so you can see. But I'm going to start there. I wrap. I dig. There we go. Busted loose. And I'm coming out right there, because I don't want any of this bottom section left, because when I squeeze there's always a little bit of clay. It's kind of like this at the bottom, because I squeeze in, but I can't squeeze the very, very, very bottom of it. So I cut that at a slant, like so. So at a slant, then I can discard this, get rid of this, and keep in mind it was thrown all the way to the bat. So there was no bottom to it whatsoever. So now I'll bring my teapot over and I'll look at it and see if it sits the way I want it to. And I want the bottom of my spout to be about right here where that line is. I made that little line just with my finger, just so that when I just barely tilt it, it doesn't pour out. I also don't, like it before, it would have been shooting straight out if I'd cut it flat. So I cut it at a slant. And I kind of lucked out, to be honest. It doesn't usually go that well. Like this is first try, and I think I'm gonna go with it. So I'm gonna line it up, make sure that both sides are somewhat equal. Bottom of my spout is in line with that. Look at it every which way. So now I'm going to draw a line around it with my modeling tool. I could use a pencil, dull pencil, something like that as well. And these lines, I don't really worry about them being visible, because I'm going to end up putting a coil around this, or at least I think I might, or at least, at the very least, I'll be blending the spout onto it. So I'll set that there for now. And I know I need to score right along that line. So I'll score a little bit. And it's kind of a rough score. It also lets me know where I'm going to cut holes in it so that I can let liquids out of it. So now I'm going to get that bottom line. Line that back up. All the way around. Okay, so that's where we are thus far. Okay. so just scoring a little bit more and I'll score the other side. Here I use the needle tool instead of the serrated rib because I want to get a little bit better markings. And this spot we'll really never see again after I blend in my spouts. I don't worry too much, but I do want it to be nice and stable, of course. So I'm going to try it with a straw. This piece is a little bit drier than I would like, but we're going to see. So I'm going to set this like so. And I'm going to start with one randomly placed straw hole. Once I put the straw in, I kind of bore it out a little bit. Okay. So I'm going to do quite a few of these because this is a big, wide entry to a spout. So I've got quite a bit of space to work with, and I want that liquid to pour out fairly quick. I don't want it to glug. If I don't have enough holes and that weight of that water is pushing and waiting to get out, it doesn't flow very well. The more air you allow through, or the more liquid you allow through, the air is coming through the lid. And I'll show you this in just a second once I get a few more holes poked. Okay. I'll go back and bore some of these out a little more. But yeah, I don't get too far off on the pattern, simply due to the fact that you'll see them on the inside. So I don't want to get too wild and crazy. And I do focus a little bit more on some of the bottom holes because that's where it starts to flow first, because the liquid, no matter how low it gets on volume, the liquid will still start pouring from the bottom first, obviously with gravity. So, got a bunch of holes poked. Now I'm ready to poke those little residual pieces out with the needle tool. I'm going to poke each of those. Almost every one of those came out pretty easy. So like I said before, I thought it was a little too dry. It's actually perfect because every one that I poked in stayed right there in the hole. So now I'm going to take my straw and bore it out a little. Pour it out. Every one of them. You could potentially cut this whole section out as well. Some people like the straining abilities, but a lot of people use tea bags where you won't have to strain it, but if you're doing loose leaf, you may want some form of straining, but I think this is still too big to really strain anything. I think this is just sort of a path. I also think sometimes this doesn't allow necessarily for cleaning into the spout area where you may get some resin, so you could cut it out. I'll do a little bit of both. Actually, I'll do both just to show you. So the spout is going to go on here. Those holes would never allow me to get back in here. So I will use, let me grab an X-Acto blade. I want to be a little bit more precise. So I could stick with that, but again, I can't get inside and clean that spout. I know I drink tea a lot. It will develop a resin inside the piece. So I'm just going to carve inside my score marks. And get it as clean as possible. So again, you can do the holes if you want to. In this case, I'm going to go with a hole. I'm going to carve that hole a little bit better. And before moving on, I do want to clean that up just ever so slightly. I can always go back from the inside, but right now it's easy access, so I really want to get in there and clean this up. Okay, so we got a little hole. Again, I'm going to score just a little bit better because I wounded it. Most of it's still intact. Okay, then I'm going to score my spout. And be careful while you're doing these. The spout I leave pretty wet because I want some flexibility, but it also will warp in my hands as I pick it up. With the cutting wire, it's never exactly precise when I cut through it, especially that part where it like really let go and sort of caved in. I can use the serrated rib to really even some of those little patches or blotches out of the way. So now I'm ready to score and slip. So I got a little bit of slip in here. Okay. So now I'm ready to adhere my spout on. Now I'm going to look at it every which way after I get a slight compression. Just make sure it's lined up. And as straight as I can get it. Okay, so it's on there fairly well. Now I'm just going to go through and clean it up. Really press it on there. I don't think I'm actually going to have to put a coil. Sometimes if it's really way off or my spout was a little dry, I couldn't bend it the way that I got to bend it here or had the opportunity to do. I will add a coil all the way around here and blend it. I'm not sure I'm even going to have to do that on this one. But I am going to really compress this to give myself some more clay to draw across that line. So I'm going all the way around, just bringing that clay from the spout because it is wet enough to adhere to my teapot. I like how well that went on there. So far so good. It is sticking a little bit further down than I want, so I'm going to bend that back up. Then I'm going to take my sponge. Actually, I'm going to take a paintbrush first. So this will also help it stick. It's basically creating its own little line or slipstream of slip as I go around. Okay, so you can see the top, blending it in and adding a little bit of moisture for slip. As you know, slip is just clay and water, aka the glue of clay. The slip I have in here is just what's residual from throwing. Probably about 6 pieces, at least 6. So I know I made the teapot for the video and 3 mugs, just for fun. Okay, I really like that seam, it's cleaning up nicely. I'm going to go back in there with a firm hand and a sponge. Raggedy sponge for cleanup. Yeah, not many wounds on this all the way around here. There's always some little wounds that you might have to dig a little bit more or clean up a little more. So now you can see the spout is adhered. You can kind of get the once over. Right here needs a little bit more cleanup, a little bit down here. Okay, yeah, right there where the little gap is, you just clean the water off. There we go. So now I'm ready for my lid, which again, I threw upside down. I open almost as wide as my lid seat here, almost as wide, and then I lift straight up and then tilt those walls out just a little bit. So I'm gonna go ahead and put a handle on this. So I've got a little tiny piece of clay, and I can do 1,001s. Usually when I make handles, especially something this small, I'll make at least 5 handles before I decide on one. Maybe add some textures, or who knows. Sometimes I stick with a simple pattern, and sometimes I get a little bit more complex. So right now I'm just rolling a little baby carrot. Gonna flatten that out just a little bit. Add a little water for flexibility. Grab my sponge. So I can do any number of things with this. I am going to start by cutting a slant. I could wrap this around, I'm trying to think of how it would sit on the pot. I could wrap this around a tool, score and slip it on. Obviously way too big here, way too big. I could see what kind of flexibility it would allow me to get away with here. This one, just kind of winging it as I go here, but I like the shape that I've got going, and it'll make some good contact with the lid. What I mean is it will give me some good space or good surface contact. Touches a lot of surface area of the lid. There we go. Okay. So I like that one quite a bit. Set it down. I'm going to tilt it just to get more contact with the lid. The further off it sticks, the further it winds off, the more risk I run of it breaking later on. So I don't want fragility, I want dependability. Sounds like a marketing campaign there. So now I'm going to set it where I want it. And I can kind of see just from my throwing marks on the top where it needs to be. So I'll make a mark on each side. And I'll score. Where it's going to be. And I know that it goes into a V shape like that. It goes thinner. Okay. A little bit of slip, or pretty much just water, but with a little bit of clay in there. And a little score underneath here. Stick that on. Get it well centered. Check it for alignment every which way. There we go. So that'll be my little handle. Okay, so there's the handle on top of the lid. So now I've got my teapot with the lid. Not gonna necessarily grab full on that handle yet. Okay, so there is my teapot with a lid. Now I need to make a handle. I can make a handle back here. I can make a handle like a lunch pail. I've seen people make the lunch pail handle come up and over, and they split it into two parts. You can even make little slots for a bamboo handle. So you can buy like a little bamboo handle from Clay Supply, Hobby Supply store. So in that case, I would make little rings like this, and I'd score and slip those on. Try to make it as straight with the spout as possible. But in this case, I am going to make something that kind of fits the design of my little handle up here, so something a little more whimsy, or with a little more whimsy. I've been making a lot of these lately. They're kind of a spiral, asymmetric handle, but they're also pretty well balanced when you pour them. Right now I'm just trying to make sure that my coil is nice and even all the way across. You can see some bumps and lumps. So I'm just utilizing the table to roll them out clean. Okay, good. Gonna flatten that out just a bit. I don't want it too flat because I don't want it too thin. And again, I don't want it fragile. Cut at about a 45-degree angle. I like the edge on that. Okay, just cleaning it up. I'm going to do my little side edges that make it appear thinner than it really is. More of a, I guess, an optical illusion. But it's still pretty sturdy because it's still got that thickness of that clay. Alright, so now I'm going to, just to be on the, or err on the side of caution, I'm going to moisten that. Give me a little bit more flexibility because I am going to bend this quite a bit. Okay, I'm going to add some pressure back here because I know that's the low spot where it gives me more and more space for my hand. So I could put this on straight in the back. I actually may do that. I think it fits better than what my initial idea was. Maybe, we'll see. Again, I always make a bunch of handles and never stick with my initial idea. It's part of the process. So the original idea I had was to do like this little winding handle like this. Let's see what that looks like. I like it to, not only does it create good balance as far as holding the teapot, but it also I don't have to align it with the spout. But I am going to do just an upside down handle. I'm going to do it straight instead of that windy. I don't think the winding looks that great. Okay, I'm getting kind of a guesstimate of where this handle is going to go. So I do want that to go close to the lid, but not too close. So I'm going to mark those roughly. So now the top one's going above that line, and the bottom one down here. Okay, so I'm going to score and slip. Score first. Right there. Make sure it's in line with my spout. I'm even going to turn my handle right now. It's not absolutely necessary, but I want to make it all aligned so that way I can get a good view of it. And the main thing with, especially with this upside down handle, is I don't want the handle to tuck underneath. There are different types of handles that can. The half heart would tuck well under here, but the upside down, it creates a handle you have to hold kind of cockeyed, and I don't want that. Okay, so now I'm going to add, whoops, as I hit my handle, I'm going to add a little bit of slip on there. I'm going to set my lid aside so that I can tilt this, because I don't want to flip it upright. I see that a lot too with lids, and my students, they'll put a lid on and then they'll go to look at something and the lid will fall off. So just be aware, be careful. So now time for scoring and slipping on the handle. I'll start, just set the top where it's supposed to be. The bottom is what I'm going to focus on first. So now that I'm not doing that whimsical handle, I'm regretting adding that much water to it. Now it's a little floppy. The water I added to make sure that it was flexible, because now I'm not flexing it that far. Okay, before I even really commit to where I'm sticking it, I want to make sure it's straight and in line with my spout, which it pretty much is. Okay, and I'm going to take my paintbrush. I always check to see with the paintbrush going around my handle if I can just sort of melt away a little bit of the clay and make my handle nice and flush, but I never blend, but I will sometimes take the back of a paintbrush or a pencil and just kind of go along the line if it's not completely flush. Usually it's clean enough to where I don't have to worry about it too much, but if I maneuvered a lot adjusting a handle, then I might need to trace around it. So just kind of get a quick close-up in there, just brushing in here. And so I haven't even really focused on the top other than making sure that they were aligned with my spout. Okay, now I'm going to start focusing on that top part. Right now I'm looking at it, it looks a bit long, but I do want to be able to grab a whole hand in there. So used to making handles for mugs that I usually make a 2 or 3 fingered mug. Can't stand a 1 fingered mug. I don't know why. I think it's just not enough support or stability for me. So at the top, I like to take my finger, and I don't blend, I just smash down a little bit or compress. Sounds fancier. But just adhere more of the handle to the pot. And you can see it's kind of flopping on me a little bit, but I want to pop that up and eventually be about right there. So I'm going to take my paintbrush again and really stick that handle on there. And with a teapot, it's not like mugs there's so many mugs that I make that sometimes I just make it, and with the stoneware I can just set it on the shelf and be done with it. With a teapot, I usually make it, let it settle a little bit for like, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours at the most. And of course, depending on the weather. But I'll bag it, and then the next day I'll take a look at it again and just see if I overlooked any components or anything that I want to adjust before it gets too hard. So like this one, that handle just keeps slumping on me, and I want it about right there. So this we'll let dry for a little while. I'm going to clean up right in here. My handle has a little excess on that side, so I'm just going to level it out. clean it off. That little excess. And around that little edge. Okay, and I am finicky with handles, so I will sit here for quite a while and just make sure this thing is straight and everything's aligned. Nothing sticks out too far. Again, this one is slumping on me. Part of it's just the size, the sheer size of the handle, because it's going to be a solid 5-finger handle. So sometimes I will even put this into a trimming chuck. I have one right behind me. But I'll put it into a trimming chuck like so, and I'll let it dry like this. Just a little tip or trick that I'm sure I learned from somebody somewhere along the lines. If I learned it from you, I apologize for not giving you credit, but this is the teapot in a nutshell. Again, I want that handle to dry a bit more, so I'm going to let it dry at that angle. But this is the finished product without fine-tuning details, which I will get to. So the teapot, hopefully my handle will be up here by the time it's finished. You could do a lunch pail style handle, split it, and again you could do the little loops that later would be the bamboo handle. So that's the teapot assembly.